Well, today I was gonna show you guys how to start the channeling of the back here, but I want to get the seat covered up first so that we don't get that all messy. So my plan was to add some cotton batting and then some poly batting and the fabric to the seat, and then cut the channels in the back of this chair and show you guys how to do channel back tufting on a chair without sewing it, like sandwiching two pieces of fabric together with batting in the middle and sewing it. So this is like an easier way to go about doing it. This is also leans more towards the traditional method, even though we're using foam. Traditionally, before they had sewing machines, they would create these channels with their stuffing material, and then they would hand stitch, hand tuft those channels to the inside. That's what we plan on doing with this. So if you guys have any questions as we do it, just blurt them out and I'll be happy to answer them. I've cut my fabric material and my batting material, but we're gonna get some cotton batting to put on the seat, and I think I've got my camera is tracking me, so you guys can follow me over here to the table. Well, let's measure. First, I want to measure the seat. We have this thin piece of poly batting that I left on the seat for last time. That was the batting that we used to make the template of the foam. So I'm just putting it on the top of there so it doesn't go to waste. It's already in perfect shape. And now I need to measure for how much cotton batting I want to put on the top here. And I do kind of want that to come over on the sides, but not too far. I don't want to build up too much on the front. But I'm going to measure for everything I need. It doesn't need to tuck all the way into my seat because I don't want to clog up the pull-through spots where everything comes through, but it does kind of need to tuck back there to smooth out. We're going to get the seat completely covered because this cotton batting and the poly batting is pretty fragile. So if we leave it to just that while we do these, it's going to get all messed up. So we're going to just get that covered so we can focus on the rest of the chair. I'm going to be measuring just inside that tuck down to about halfway to here for this measurement, and that gives me about 26 inches long. And then I'm going to do the same thing wide. And I've got about 35 inches wide. My cotton batting comes in a roll like this. This, I believe, is, let me see if I can zoom out here. There we go. This, I believe, is like a 1-inch cotton batting, and it's sold by the pound. You can get this on my website too if you need it. I'm just gonna sort of drape this over where I want it to go. And I don't need all of this material to tuck back. And I'm also not going to need all of this material to go underneath my chair, but I do need it to soften the front. So the first thing I want to do is sort of tear away all of the cotton batting material that I don't need. I do save this. We have a bin for all the cotton batting that we tear away during this process, and then we reuse it for either smaller pieces of upholstery or use it to stuff pillows or other things around the shop. I'm going to tear away the back. You will find that using scissors on this material is really difficult. They're not typically sharp enough to get through. The tearing it is pretty easy, although it tears better in one direction than it does the other. Like it tears better along the short side easier than it does along the long side. So now I can sort of just tuck this feathered edge back between the foam, so this starts to round out this area. I'm going to do that everywhere where it goes. And then I don't want this harsh factory edge because I'm going to see that, so I also want to feather it at every edge so that it doesn't go up and bulk up underneath. And again, I'm just tearing this sort of like halfway down the face of the frame, which is only about 3 inches. I'm leaving like about 1.5 inches underneath, not covered with this, because this will pull down when I go to put batting on it. And I don't want this material to go underneath the chair because it'll get bulky and lumpy right under here and it'll make the shape look not great. So we just are trying to like smooth this out so when we shape the seat that all of this sort of like gradients down to nothing. So the next step is to put, yeah, go ahead.
Are you gonna glue that cotton batting like we do poly or no?
No, and after going to Virginia and learning a little bit about what they do there are a lot of instances now where I won't glue the batting either. But if I need the batting to hold still, I might put glue on it. But this is gonna be, I'm gonna be stapling it to the front or like underneath this way. And it's just gonna go through the sides. The batting doesn't need to really get stapled down. You don't want to fill that, like where you put all your staples on the top of the frame. In this chair in particular, the staples are gonna go on the top of the frame over here. So every layer of material that we put up there is going to like build up a layer of material. So if we staple too much stuff down there, our staple becomes less effective because it's stapling through too many layers of material. So here I have the batting kind of tuck in and like come out, and I can trim off the excess, but I don't staple it down there. I will put the final fabric layer stapled down there though. And we'll go into that like as we do it. So now I'm just gonna put this poly batting on top. This is pre-measured. This is measured to come right to the bottom, go all the way to the back, touch the frame in the back. And then you add a couple of inches so that you can pull it with your hands. You need enough material to pull with your hands. If you end up cutting yourself short, you're either gonna pull it too tight and it's gonna look lumpy, or you're gonna end up having to cut a whole nother piece of material. So keep that in mind if you don't like wasting material. So I'm just gonna tuck this back, just like I did with cotton batting. And I put this on top because it is sort of gonna tame the cotton batting that's underneath, because that can tend to be pretty fragile. And over time, gravity, like if it is up here on the back, gravity will pull it down because it is heavy. So here, I do wanna make my cuts for the frame, and we talk about what we're cutting for here, which is we have our pull-through spot on this side. Up in the front here, we're cutting around this arm so that we can get the flap to come through here, and so that the material can wrap around. So this layer of batting is the first practice material, actually second, because we did this with the barrier fabric, that we can get this cut. So we do that Y cut for the side. So I'm just going to make that cut now. Does anybody need to see the Y cut again? Because we can turn the phone and put that on there. So with that Y cut, it leaves that little V of material in front of this leg so that this part can come over to the side. That's going to shape around the side. I need that same cut on this side. And this is still a lot of material to go down the side when I just needed to tuck it down there. So I'm just going to trim this back, leave myself like 1 or 2 inches to tuck down into the chair. This is only true for this batting layer. That's not true for fabric. You need enough fabric to staple it to the chair, but we don't need all of this batting to go all the way down into the chair. We just need it to cover the foam top. So now I can put the rest of this back through. Now that that's all fit through the top, we can come through and start attaching it to the frame, creating the shape that we want to create on the front of this chair. So when I start stapling that, I'm making sure that this line stays straight, and I'm stapling everything to the bottom of the frame, the very bottom, keeping it in line with the edge of the frame, and using diagonal staples about every ½ inch so that it'll create a nice flat line. But before I start riddling this thing with staples, I know I got a stapler. Before I start riddling it with staples, I sort of like to set the material in place so that it doesn't move around when I start riddling it with staples. So the first thing I do is I lock it down in the middle, and I'm pulling this down nice and taut and making sure that my cotton batting layer doesn't go all the way down to that edge. And sometimes I'll use my hand to sort of smooth it out, and I always pull that material, this is why you make sure you have enough, under the frame so that I can see the edge of the frame, because that helps me to put my staples in as a guide. So I'm going to put just a few diagonal backing staples to hold it down there in front. The next area that I'm going to lock down is sort of this leg in the corner here, so that I can stretch that material out this way away from that staple, so I get rid of any excess material here. I'm going to put in a couple diagonal staples there, and then I'm going to go do the same thing to the other side and stretch this out this way. And then we're just going to lock that down in the corner here. And that sort of like does everything I need to hold that shape, and now I can go in and fill in the gaps between those staples by just managing the fabric like top to bottom, but everything else is stretched out this way. So I'm going to do the same thing with the sides here. Lock down that shape. I'm going to go to the other side and do that. And you'll notice I'm working back and forth too. That's helping me to make sure that that material is being stretched across the surface of the chair evenly, so that the weight distribution is even, and so that you can make sure that everything lines up and you don't rob yourself of material anywhere. All right, so for the purposes of the batting, we're going to take from the center staple and then we're going to work our way from the middle out to the leg. We're going to do the same thing from the sides and work our way to the middle of the leg. Then we're just going to cut off this extra material. We don't need to do any special folds or anything here. We just need this to like fill in that area. But we're just going to cut off the extra, and we'll cut off all the extra underneath. So I'm going to work my way from the center out. In between these staples, I'm going to be pulling, I use my hand, like the widest width of my hand to pull that down, because if I pull it in one little area, it just tightens one area. But if I cover the whole surface area, it pulls it down flat, and then I can keep this line as straight as possible. And the reason I work my way from the center out is because if I end up with excess material, I can push it out that way so we can cut it off, and I can just take out that staple and readjust it. It's called staple mitigation, folks. We're avoiding removing. So I worked on that side, and now I want to come back through this way. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you guys can get us a follow my head. I don't know if you can see this line right here, how straight it is across. Because sometimes if you don't do it straight, you're going to end up seeing the transition of that. And you don't want to see that. So I'm going to make sure I have them stapled all around the sides. I think I did get this one. It does go a little bit up the leg too. There's a little bit of curve around the leg. And just trim off this excess. I leave about a ½ inch of material there so that the fabric can use it to like fill in that area, but it's just like a little nubby. You don't need to leave a lot. This off. And then for the material that dangles down, I'm taking my scissors to the bottom of the frame, just flush with the bottom of the frame, and I am just cutting it straight to the bottom of the frame. I don't want this material to roll over and touch the bottom of the frame because that could make this area look lumpy. If I cut it flush to the edge, then this will look so super straight and clean with my trim. And wherever you have show wood, when you put your staples in, you want to make sure that there is like a finger width gap between that wood and your staple for any material that is not your outside fabric. That's going to make sure that when you put your outside fabric up against that show wood, that it looks nice and clean with your trim. You just can't like bulk up those areas with too much material. So here I'm just giving the whole chair a haircut. And that looks like a pretty juicy seat so far. And something here. So the next layer for this chair is the fabric. All right, so we pre-cut the velvet already too. I just want to make sure it's going in the right direction. Velvet has a nap. When you wipe it down, it should like smooth it out and make it light. When you wipe it up, it'll rough it up and make it dark. We want it to smooth down from back to front, because when people scooch off a chair, they scooch from back to front. And if they're scooching against the nap, it's gonna make it look all tattered. All right, so let me just test this. That feels smooth, rough. So we're gonna turn it this way. The other thing to note is when you're putting two panels of velvet together, that if you put them together in two different naps, or like against their own nap, they can appear to be two different colors. I don't know if it is as visible on camera, but against the nap, these will appear to be two different colors of velvet. So I've got this pre-cut, which is almost the same measurements as my batting, but a little bit longer because I needed material to pull with my hands. So I measured it all the way to the back, to the top of the frame, all the way to the front, to underneath the frame, and then I added 4 inches. For my sideways measurement, it came underneath the frame here, over the top, underneath the frame, and then I added 4 inches. And that's just gonna make sure I have 2 inches on either side to pull with my hands. Now I gotta make sure I took this off in the right direction. See it this way. So you want to try and put this on as centered as possible. I need enough material to come around, pull over this way. I need enough material to tuck in the back edge through the pull-through spot. And I need enough material to go left or right through the sides all the way. So what I want to do before I start making any cuts is stretch the material across the surface, centered front to back and side to side, but also I want to like tighten it across the seat and pre-tuck just the poles down into where the pull-through spots are, but not the long part of this, because I need to fold this back in front of the seat to make my cuts so that I can see what I'm doing. So from the sides all the way to the back, I'm going to do this tucking. And what that does is it, one, it shows us what it's going to look like upholstery, which is lovely, but it also protects the areas that you need to protect from cutting it too far. So we're protecting it by putting it between the foam and the frame. And it's going to hold all of that material in place while you make your cuts so it doesn't move around. So in this chair, the cuts that I have to make are Y cuts for the fronts of the arms, and also smaller Y cuts for the back leg here too, because we have a pull-through spot here on the side under the arms, and we also have a pull-through spot here on the back. So all of our cuts are to allow the fabric that's on top to come through these spots, but these areas are barriers and you need to cut around them. Important to note that we don't remove any fabric during this phase. We're just making relief cuts. If you remove fabric, you might find that it difficult to get any of that real estate back. So, I'm gonna get the view where I can show you guys these cuts close up, and we'll just go over the Y cuts again and show you how I mark them with my hands. Anybody have any questions so far?
No, but you see what I'm doing? We're learning upholstery.
Oh, hello. Okay.
Hi.
I'm teaching upholstery, isn't that crazy? Okay, I'm gonna get this. Above here, and I haven't done any batting or anything on it yet, so those are real gently. We can cut those with scissors. So we're cutting our first cut for this arm right here. And the Y cut is a cut that goes straight for that barrier and then it rides off to either side of that. So like this little piece of fabric that ends up staying there protects and like cleans up in front of this, and then everything else can go around it. I'm gonna get a Sharpie so you guys can see what I'm doing. I do not recommend that you use Sharpies at this stage of your project, but it's just difficult for you guys to see that anyway. So if I couldn't see this barrier, I'm relying on feel by like putting my hands in there. So the first side of that, I'm feeling for this side that starts where that pull through starts. So like the opening, this opening, I'm looking for the edge that starts that opening. And then I can put my finger right where that is, just further over than I think, and then drag my finger out and make a dot for that general area, because that's going to put that dot just inside that line. And I can see where that area is on this side. So I'm just going to make another dot just inside the line of the arm there. It will help. Those are my dots for either side of the arm. And it doesn't go to the very edge. It comes just inside the edge, because I'm going to need a little bit of extra material to fold around the sides here. So the other line I want to make is that line that goes straight through the middle of that arm. And then I'm going to put my fingers up against the arm here and make a dot there, because I always have two fingers on me, so that's just a good guide for me. And then from this dot that I made on the line, I'm going to draw a line to the left-hand side of that arm, and then one to the right-hand side of that arm. So now you can see the letter Y. That's what we're cutting. And this cut can really go all the way up to the wood, but if you're new to this, you may want to refrain from making the whole cut right away and just make it a little shorter than you need it and make it longer as you need it. And then do that after you do all your cuts. So now we have this little V that tucks inside there, and the rest of this material can go this way. And then as soon as I have the leg cut back here, then I can tuck this in the side. So here, I cannot see through my frame to see where that leg is, but I can put my hand in there and feel for it, and then back my fingers out so I know where to put those dots. Before I make any actual dots, I'm going to remove this material. I'll pull a bunch of it out, and we'll just do that. And then for this leg, I'm just dog-earing this material in front of the leg. I'm going to make my cut from this corner here, because that's going to leave the same amount of material on that side as I'll have on this side, so I'll get full coverage. So now I can put my hand in there, feel for where my fingers will go, here to here. That is the left and right hand side of that leg. And then from the center of this corner, we'll make a line all the way down through the center of those two dots. 2 finger widths away from the thumb. I'm going to make that line. That's what we're looking at. And now we can make this cut. And again, you can make the cut longer later. You don't need to go hard right away. So that little triangle protects that leg, and this can come through the pull-through spot. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that now so that it keeps the fabric in place. I'm going to move you guys to the outside of this so you can see that. So here you can see where it's coming out. These are usually where you can squeeze. Difficult. You can see how that cut goes right up against the leg on that side. That's how close we were. And it's exactly this width coming through. That's good. On this side, you can see where it bunches up in front of the leg a little bit. That means you can cut it a little bit longer. I'm going to leave it for now because I'm going to make the cuts on the other side before I rob this side of any material. So let's get you put. So we have another line cut. And this arm, I'm just pushing that material line straight through the center of that leg. Put the 2 fingers right up against the frame so I can mark a dot where do I start to make line joints. And then I make one to the outside of that arm, and then one to the inside. And then I'll make this move. Now I'm not going straight up to the frame because I don't even want to like trim that to fit better as everything pulls through and tucks through. So I'm going to give myself some space to like make a cut. And this is going to tuck down. Now I can make my cut for the back leg here. Pre-tucking that fold, finding where the line is. Pulling the fingers out in the same spot so I can see where that goes. And then this line is going to go from the corner of this flap 2 finger widths away from the thumb. Down to one side and then down to the other. So that should free up all of our pull-through flaps so we can start cutting those suits. So the triangle is tucked in, that just stays in front of the leg. And then when you're tucking in these long flaps, sometimes it's easier to untuck them and then push them through with the end of the fabric first that you're threading the needle. I'm going to get a look. See if this is right. Tight squeeze in there. What do we want? Because we don't need gaps between the pieces of it. Because sometimes this is hard on your hands. Start with a single frame. Here's the back panel. And make sure before you're making your cuts, make sure you really know what it is you're cutting for. It's easy to just kind of line cut for this general area. If you cannot feel it in your fingers, don't make the cut. So that's just enough to staple down to the outside. And there's a little bunch like right around this leg, so I don't know if we're going to end up having to cut it more there or not. Let's see this around to the other side. This was a barrier fabric for the top, so this is just going to get stapled eventually on top of this so that it holds up nice and tight. But we couldn't staple it down, so we wouldn't be able to get this through. And the barrier fabric didn't attach to the metal here, which is why it's stuck to the floor there. We still need to take it out. So that's looking good. All the sides through, let's look at the top. Because now we just need to make sure it's not malfunctioning at the top, but all the wrinkles. This is looking pretty good. So, once I had everything kind of pulled and smoothed into place, then I can start sort of locking some staples. I'm not even sure if we need to make any extra cuts. If they do, they're going to be right up front here. pretty close. That looks good. Okay, let me get this turned back around to the tracking camera.
Recording in progress.
So now we can start stapling this down. Just like every other laying that we do on here, we want to put temporary staples in first. We're going to lock it down in the center in the front, then in the center in the back, then in the center on each side before we start throwing down any more staples, to make sure we get it nice and taut where we want it, and to make sure that this doesn't twist and turn while we're putting staples in. If you were to start staples at one side and go all the way around, by the time you get to this side, like all your material is going to bunch up here. So this is our way of being able to stretch out this material across the surface of the seat to make sure the weight is distributed evenly and to make sure the pattern or the grain, everything stays nice and straight. I always start with the front staple here, and I just want to pull straight down, and then I'm going to put my first temporary staple underneath right here. We talked a little bit about temporary staples before, but a temporary staple is, instead of going flat all the way down, we tip it to the side a little bit before we pull the trigger, and that leaves a little bit of a gap underneath that staple so that we can come and take it out if we need to, and we will. This is the first process of stretching it out. You're probably going to have to take out these temporary staples. Staple removal doesn't end at the staple removal phase. You are going to have to remove staples the whole time. One of the things I want you to look out for when you're pulling this is for symmetry in the lines that like pull in your project. If this had more lines on one side than the other, it would tell me that we had our material stretched more to one side or the other. Here, this is looking fairly symmetrical. It means I pulled it straight down and it's coming from the same tension at either side. So this is a good way to get it figured out like right away before you start stretching it out. So from this staple, the center staple will go to the back, and we'll put the center staple back there. And these staples in the back of the chair are going into the top of the frame, not the side of the frame, not the bottom of the frame, but the top of the frame right here. And that's to prevent a buildup of materials on the outside edge where we have to put our side material, like our fabric. It has to be flat there. If we keep building up layers here, you're going to see that on the outside. So all of the staples that come through the pull-through spots go to the top of the frame, and they go at a diagonal angle so they cover more surface area. And when all's said and done, they'll all be within a ½ inch of each other. But first we're going to do center, 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 center. Before we do any other staples, make sure that everything looks straight. For me, I might put like 2 or 3 staples in one area to sort of capture a little wider of an area instead of one, depending on the material. And here, I'm going to pull it down through the side. I'm going to show you kind of how I pull it. We want this to be tight like a trampoline on the top, not like a drum. We don't want it so tight that when someone sits on it, it tears away, but we do want it to feel bouncy when we're done. So I sort of pull out from the frame like this, but I use my thumbs. I'm using my thumbs like, I'm grabbing the fabric this way and using my thumbs to pull off the side of the frame so that I can get that good stretch. So, lock down a couple center staples there, and then I'll go to the other side. Sometimes I like to keep an extra stapler on the other side and use 2 staplers at the same time. Oh, and then we're going to do the one in the back. So now we have all of the centers done so that this is nice and stretched out evenly across the top. Now, first, I think I'm going to need to tighten up this one in the front here. Let me grab a pair of pliers. It looks a little loose. And when I feel the top, the fabric kind of bounces like underneath my hand, which means it doesn't have like, it's not fully tightened to the seat. So that tells me that it's a little loose, but also if I were to come forward like this, and push my hand. If it still pushes extra fabric there, that's more tight you can make it. So because I used a temporary staple, it was really easy for me to take that out and come back to tighten it up without damaging the fabric. So here I'm going to give it one last good pull. Do the same thing I do with my batting, which is pull it underneath so you can see the edge. That's much better. So this is nice and taut now. So my next staples, I'm going to do the corners of everything. So from the center staple, I'm going to pull this material out in this direction, away from that staple. This is going to tighten that fabric up left to right so that you don't have any wrinkles here. But I'm also pulling it down in this direction so that I can tighten it up here and down here. And I'm watching this line to make sure it stays straight. I'm going to put a temporary staple in the front, right here by this leg, because this is like a show edge wood, so it would come near there. So I'm going to put my first staple, I should have put it underneath, just before the leg. So this corner staple, I'm going to put right here, about 2 inches away from the leg here. And that's just going to hold that in place so that I can put the other side in, and then I can step back and look at it and make sure that it looks straight. Up close, you can't see if you pulled it down too far on the left or the right. You need to step back. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. This is a little easier to see than it is on the sides. So I'm pulling it down this way so it can stretch front to back, but also I'm pulling it to the right so it can stretch away from that staple. If there is any bagginess between these two staples, that's going to create wrinkles and pleats up in the front where you don't want it. But this is going to get it stretched out nice, like to start with. So that's got my sides there stretched out. I'm going to do the same thing to the back 2 corners. I have the center staple. I'm going to pull out the back corners and stretch those out and staple them. I'm going to do the same thing to the sides. But from the front, I'm going to go to the back and then go side to side, directly across from each other so it stretches evenly. So from the back, I pull down and out away from that center staple. Here. You also want to look at this back line because that's got to stay straight too. If you pull too tight in different areas of the back panel, you might see like where it ripples in the back. So you want to make sure that that line is staying straight too, or you're going to have that. So I got that back side done. Then I'm going to do the side. Excellent. And come over and do the other side. Now, I'm not doing it here yet. That's a whole different ballgame. I'm just grabbing the sides. So now I'm stepping back. I want to get like eye level down to the front to see what's going on. To me, it looks like this right hand side is up a little bit higher, so I'm going to take this staple out here. I'm even getting that staple over there. I'm going to do staple removers, guys. Okay, so I'm going to take this temporary staple out. I know I needed to focus more on like pulling it down a little bit more. If I pull this fabric, let's see if you can see it, in the wrong direction, if I pull it a little left or a little right, you'll start to see it getting wrinkled up in the front. If I pull it a little to right and not down far enough, you're going to start to see that fabric move up there too. Let's see what that did. Oh yeah, that's way better. Okay, so now that I have everything sort of stretched out and locked down in about the right place, I can start throwing more staples in. So I'm going to come from the center and I'm going to come out and end at this staple. If I didn't pull enough, I'm going to end up with a little bit of extra material, and then I can take that staple out and then keep going with it. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to stop here because there's a folding that has to happen in this area that I want to make sure we can address that early. So we're just going to lock this first center line down for right now. Let me see if I can get this to stop moving. Good. So that I can come back here. So this would be how I did it, whether I had this set up facing the camera for you guys or not. I would come at it from the side like this, pull my hand down so that I can see the line in this direction, my sight line, and then pull it underneath and come back through with my stapler and staple. I do it setting up like this, even though it would be infinitely easier doing it like down on top of it, because I can see the shape of the seat this way. And that's what's going to ultimately matter when all is said and done. So I use my hand to do the swiping motion forward, but again, I'm still pulling away. This is a big long chair. Away from that staple in this direction too. And when we're filling in the gaps between the staples, then we can start putting them every half inch apart. Every staple that gets covered by another layer of staples is going to go in on that diagonal angle. That's going to cover more surface area, keep that fabric from fraying over time. So I'm not just pulling down, but I'm also pulling and swiping to the side. I'm looking for not just a straight line up here, but I want it to look straight down here too and not lumpy. And here, I already don't like the way it is looking combining up there towards the end, so I'm going to take this last staple out. And then just put a new one in to make sure it's in this head spot. You guys are going to have to help me with time because Crosby is not here today. I have no idea what time it is. What are we looking at? 3 o'clock. Oh, so that's another hour. Okay, so now I'm just gonna pull this down again. I'm only gonna take it up to that leg, but already I like that way better. And then we're gonna do the same thing from the center towards the other side. I'm going to use it for me to get to the same way. You can do it in just small increments. You don't have to do it all at once. I'm doing mine like a couple inches at a time here. I can already see it's coming up to this area and it's going to buckle again. So I'm just going to remove this last staple so I can work my way in. If you see areas, like in this chair right now, there's like a sharp pull right here. That is the staple that has that pulled in that area too tight. So if I come back through and just remove that staple, rid of that little hole. Drastically improved, looks like there's two of them. Smooth that out. So I can release them. And now that looks much better. Okay, so the next step is to fill in the gaps around the sides and remove the excess material. I'm checking the tops to make sure the line looks straight, it's good. So I can go from the center staple all the way out. Let's see, let me get this. There we go. So center staple out, and if I end up with excess fabric, I can remove it on the inside edge. And then center staple out towards the back. And then this will get trimmed off to be set inside the frame, but I am going to fold it over just once and just drop a couple of staples in there to like hold it in place, and then I can cut to that side. This is just going to keep it from fraying over time. Run that through with the scissors. I like to trim off all the excess as I go so that I don't leave myself with a mess. Because it becomes harder to remove the excess material if you're layering it on top of itself. So remove it when you go. After we do the sides and back, then we're going to focus on folding these corners. Anybody have any questions so far? Nothing, huh? You did it easy today.
I can figure the wine cut. I've been screwing up my wine cut, so I watched that part and I'm happy.
Oh, good. Wine cuts can be tricky, especially if you're not 100% sure where you're going with it.
I put my finger down in it and I was cutting too far. So I think the whole finger got big when I need to focus. And my lines were too wide.
Yeah.
You're doing thinner lines than I was doing. So
Yeah, and if you end up needing to make that cut longer, a very common mistake is to keep going wide. But what you want to do is keep going straight for the legs. Because if you keep going wide, then you're making that opening bigger, and it is
exactly what I'm doing.
yep, it'll put a hole right in your fabric. Yeah, that's a very common mistake. Everybody makes that mistake. When I was first, I don't think I knew exactly what I was cutting for 2 years. I was just like, well, I know it's gonna give right here.